Welcome to Law and the Machine, where artificial intelligence meets the legal system, liability, regulation, intellectual property, and the government's uncomfortable role as both rulemaker and AI adopter. The law wasn't written for this.
A reported figure suggests a staggering $1.5 billion transaction, framed as the price of safety, yet tied directly to what's been called an Anthropic loophole and the issue of piracy. It immediately raises the question, what kind of safety costs that much, and who exactly is paying penance for what?
It's a fascinating juxtaposition of terms. $1.5 billion for safety sounds like a massive investment in ethical AI, but when you pair it with loophole and piracy, it starts to look less like altruism and more like a very expensive way to resolve a deeply problematic situation. The quotes around safety in the reporting are doing a lot of work there.
It implies a strategic maneuver, doesn't it? A company like Anthropic, known for its focus on AI alignment and safety, seemingly navigating a legal or ethical bypass while simultaneously making a colossal payment. It forces a reevaluation of what safety truly means in the current AI landscape.
Precisely. It's not just about what was done, but how it's being framed. The language itself is a key part of the story, signaling a potential move to rebrand liability or intellectual property concerns as a commitment to responsible development.
To begin, what does this Anthropic loophole suggest about the current state of AI development and intellectual property rights? What kind of legal or ethical gray area might an AI company be exploiting?
The phrase Anthropic loophole points to a specific strategy or interpretation that allows an AI developer to proceed with practices that might otherwise be considered legally or ethically questionable, particularly regarding data acquisition and use. Given the context of piracy, it strongly implies navigating around established copyright laws or fair use doctrines when training large language models. Think about the sheer volume of data required to train these systems. Billions of texts, images, code snippets. The common practice has been to scrape vast swaths of the internet, often without explicit permission or licensing.
So, the loophole isn't necessarily a unique, never-before-seen legal maneuver, but rather a particular interpretation or exploitation of existing ambiguities in copyright law as it applies to AI training.
That's a fair way to put it. It's less about finding a secret clause in a statute and more about aggressively asserting a particular legal theory, perhaps an expansive view of fair use, or leveraging the argument that AI training is transformative in a way that doesn't constitute infringement. Or it could relate to jurisdictional complexities or the sheer difficulty for rights holders to detect and prove infringement at the scale of foundational model training. The loophole could also refer to a specific arrangement or agreement made with certain data providers that gives an advantage or allows for the use of data that others might deem off-limits.
And the piracy element here isn't just a casual term. It implies direct copyright infringement, doesn't it? Not just data scraping, but the unauthorized use of copyrighted material.
Absolutely. The use of piracy is quite strong. It moves beyond the general ethical debate of web scraping into a specific accusation of intellectual property theft. For many content creators and publishers, their work being ingested by an AI model without compensation or consent feels exactly like piracy. The output of these models often reflects the style, structure, and even specific content of the training data. If that data was acquired without license, then the foundational act of creating the model could be seen as built on a mountain of pirated material. It's essentially the unauthorized copying and distribution of copyrighted works, even if the distribution is indirect, manifesting as the model's ability to generate content mimicking the originals.
So, the penance then becomes the company's way of addressing these claims or preempting future lawsuits. What could a $1.5 billion penance look like in practice? Is this a settlement, a licensing deal, or something else entirely?
A sum of $1.5 billion points to something significant. It could be a massive one-time settlement payment to a consortium of rights holders. Think of a collective bargaining agreement where publishers, artists, or authors agree to drop claims in exchange for a payout. Alternatively, it might be an investment in new content licensing frameworks, where Anthropic is effectively buying future rights or even investing in companies that own large content libraries. It could also be structured as a commitment to fund programs that compensate creators or to develop new technologies specifically designed to attribute or license content for AI training. The term penance suggests an acknowledgement of past wrongs, so it's likely a compensatory measure, whether direct or indirect.
And given the show's focus on regulatory capture, this isn't just a private transaction, is it? A payment of that magnitude for piracy and safety could very well influence how regulators view the entire AI industry.
It almost certainly does. A significant financial outlay framed around safety and IP issues creates a public narrative. It allows the company to say, look, we're taking these concerns seriously, we're making a massive investment to resolve them. This can be a powerful lobbying tool. It can influence policymakers to view such industry-led initiatives as sufficient, potentially staving off more stringent government-mandated regulations. If the industry can appear to self-regulate or self-correct through these large-scale penance payments, it reduces the perceived need for external governmental oversight. It's a classic play. Address a problem with a large, visible gesture to shape the regulatory conversation in your favor.
That brings us to the most provocative part of the title, the $1.5 billion price of safety. The quotes around safety are critical here. How is safety being weaponized or repurposed in this context?
The use of quotation marks around safety is a strong signal that the reported authors are questioning the sincerity or the primary motivation behind the safety claims. It suggests that safety might be a convenient umbrella term. When a company is facing accusations of piracy, redirecting the conversation towards safety can be incredibly effective. For example, a penance payment might be spun as an investment in safe AI development that includes ethical data sourcing, when in reality, it's a direct response to IP infringement claims.
So it's a PR move, perhaps even a regulatory shield.
More than PR, it's a strategic reframing. If the public and regulators are primarily concerned with AI safety, and they are increasingly, then linking a large financial commitment to safety allows a company to align itself with public interest, even if the underlying issue is something as commercially driven as intellectual property disputes. It allows them to say, we're investing in ensuring our AI is built responsibly, which naturally includes our data sourcing practices. This can deflect from a direct admission of piracy and instead pivot to a forward-looking commitment to safety, which is much more palatable. It's a way of turning a negative into a perceived positive, shaping the narrative around responsible AI.
This makes one wonder about the broader implications for AI governance. If a company can essentially buy its way out of piracy claims under the banner of safety, what precedent does that set for smaller players or for future regulatory actions?
The precedent is concerning. It implies that for well-capitalized AI labs, the cost of piracy or past data infringements can be absorbed as a cost of doing business, potentially bundled under a safety budget. This raises the barrier to entry for smaller AI companies that might not have $1.5 billion to settle IP claims. It could consolidate power among the largest players who can afford to navigate these legal and ethical challenges with massive financial outlays. For regulators, it creates a tricky situation. Do they accept these industry-led solutions as adequate, or do they push for more prescriptive, legally binding frameworks? The danger is that these large private deals become the de facto regulatory mechanism rather than transparent, publicly debated laws. It's a classic play. Address a problem with a large, visible gesture to shape the regulatory conversation in your favor.
So these companies are effectively setting the terms of their own regulation with a hefty price tag attached?
In many ways, yes. They're demonstrating that they can address complex issues through private agreements and strategic investments, often before government bodies can even draft comprehensive legislation. This allows them to define what responsible or safe means, often in terms that are advantageous to their business models. The Penance could be seen as an investment in shaping the future regulatory environment by demonstrating good corporate citizenship in a highly visible, financially significant way. It's the ultimate form of regulatory influence.
This whole situation makes one think about how different governments are trying to tackle AI regulation. Europe is focused on risk and specific use cases. The US is looking at voluntary commitments and executive orders. Does this Anthropic scenario point to a future where the most impactful regulation comes from these massive, opaque financial settlements rather than from clear legislation?
It absolutely does. The sheer scale of this $1.5 billion transaction suggests that the industry is already self-organizing around these issues, or at least self-rectifying, in a way that bypasses traditional legislative processes. While governments are deliberating, companies are making these colossal financial moves that effectively establish market norms and address liabilities. These large payments and strategic partnerships become a form of de facto private law. It's hard for a government to then step in and impose a much smaller fine or a less comprehensive solution if the industry has already resolved the issue with such a substantial sum. This creates a challenging dynamic where the pace of legal and regulatory development lags far behind the speed of industry evolution and financial maneuvering.
And the content creators, the alleged victims of piracy in this scenario, are they getting a fair shake? Or is this just a way for large AI companies to clear the decks and continue business as usual?
That's the core question. From the perspective of individual creators, a collective settlement or an investment in new licensing structures might be seen as a necessary evil or even a positive step. It's better than nothing. However, if the penance doesn't fully compensate for past infringements or establish genuinely equitable future licensing models, then it's essentially a large-scale buyout of liability. It allows the AI companies to maintain their dominant position, having effectively paid a substantial but ultimately manageable fee for access to the world's creative output. The fear is that it legitimizes a practice of taking first and asking for forgiveness or paying penance later.
To synthesize this then, what are the key insights listeners should take away from this Anthropic loophole and its reported price tag?
First, the current AI development model, particularly regarding data, is facing immense intellectual property challenges, and companies are willing to pay enormous sums to address them. Second, the framing of these financial resolutions as safety initiatives is a powerful rhetorical tool that can influence public perception and potentially preempt more stringent government regulation.
And third, these large financial transactions, while appearing to resolve disputes, also serve to entrench the power of well-capitalized AI labs, creating a higher barrier for new entrants and shaping the regulatory landscape through private means rather than public policy.
Exactly. And the fourth point is that the use of loophole, piracy, penance, and safety together paints a picture of a sector wrestling with its foundational ethics and legal obligations, with significant financial stakes shaping the outcome.
It leaves one wondering, if the price of safety can be $1.5 billion to address alleged piracy, what does that truly say about the actual cost of building these systems ethically from the ground up? And for those without deep pockets, does it mean that compliance will forever be out of reach?
That's all for Law and the Machine. Join us next time as we continue exploring where AI and the law collide. If you found this useful, subscribe. We appreciate it.
The law will catch up, eventually.